Hello, everybody. I'm Matt Anderson, and welcome to The Road Not Taken, how ordinary people got out of their own way, and you can too. I'm very excited to introduce our guest today. Her name is Sam Howard. She is a depression coach who spent 8 years in suicidal depression from the age of 15 before deciding enough was enough, and then spent another 4.5 years trying to get herself out of depression. To her great surprise and delight, she healed herself completely in July 2017 and has since then been coaching others to do the same. She's passionate about healing, and besides drawing on her own experience with healing from mental and physical health issues, she is a qualified personal trainer, a Reiki healer, a neuro-linguistic programming professional, and neuroscience academy graduate. Her new business, The Inner Edge, educates on how healing your inner world gives you the edge in your outer world. Can't wait to learn more, Sam. Welcome so much to The Road Not Taken.
Thank you so much. That's fantastic.
For those that listen in consistently to this show, they'll know that there's one question I like to start with. And I know I kind of give a choice of two, but and maybe we end up talking about both. But for some reason, what I'm particularly interested in is, well, partly because you mentioned this in correspondence before, and you said sort of you got to this point where enough was enough. But can you talk about that day when you sort of, I mean, usually it's where we hit some kind of rock bottom and decide, okay, can't do this anymore. Talk about that in whatever terms is appropriate in terms of, you know, maybe there were multiple days, but talk about a day and then feel free to share whatever's accurate in terms of what happened.
Thank you. Yes, it was a day, actually. It really was. I can pinpoint the exact day. And I look back now and realize what a big deal that was. But what happened that day basically was that I had this awareness around how shocking my life felt for no apparent reason, because I absolutely grew up very privileged and I had everything I needed. So it wasn't for lack of resources or experiences or privileges or anything like that. And that awareness hit me like a ton of bricks on this one day. And I just realized that it was because I had taken on what everyone else had told me my life should be like. And I just decided that I didn't like the lives of anybody else around me. It was this awareness of there wasn't a single person in my life whose life I would want to live. And then decided that I had to really give myself an ultimatum. It was either get on with it and let's just leave this life as it is, or make a decision to find what a good life means to you. And don't stop until you find that. And thankfully, I chose the second. I decided that I would not stop until I created a life that I wanted to live in, a life that was exciting and interesting and happy and healthy and successful on my terms. And that was it. That was the day. And that was the day where, because a lot of people say, so you were in suicidal depression for 8 years and then what? And I was like, this was this day. This was the day, because never again since that day was leaving an option for me. I'd taken it off the table that day I decided to create a life that I wanted to live in.
And you mean by leaving, you mean suicide?
Yes.
Yeah. Okay. I just wanted to make sure it's explicitly obvious. So again, I'm curious. I mean, that day though, was there some triggering event or something? I mean, do you remember exactly where you were and what happened?
In Australia.
Oh, okay.
In Australia, I was working up north on a mining camp. This job in particular, I was up there washing dishes. So I was the pot wash for a 1,500 man camp. And I think that day I'd been up from 3 or 4 o'clock in the morning. It was my fly-in day. So I'd been up from 3 or 4 in the morning. I'd been driven to the airport by a friend of mine. I'd flown in, and at 9 a.m. I'd started my 12-hour shift. I worked for 12 hours. And by the end of it, I just couldn't physically keep going. I had a lot of physical health issues as well as mental health issues that I was dealing with. And I physically I was not able to do the job as well as I really needed to have done it. And the head chef was just absolutely lost it with me. And of course, I then lost it with him because he was notorious for bullying young women. He was an older guy, and I'd been told to watch out for him and that don't worry, you're not the only one. There's a lot of women that have quit because of him. And so I knew I had some context that he wasn't the nicest person. But I think on that day, it pushed me over the edge. And I'd been bullied for many, many years before this. So this was sort of an extension of the bullying I thought would have stopped when I left high school. Often we think we're bullied because it's high school. And then when you continue to be bullied in your adult life, you suddenly go, maybe there's something more to this. And so that was it. That was the day. I was 24. And I just thought, oh my goodness me, like this is outrageous. Like, how have I managed to attract all of this into my life? And so, it was a case of this sudden awareness. I think, you're right. It must have been the absolute edge. For me anyway, that was my tipping point.
And was this after the shift? So you had this big argument after the shift?
This was that evening.
And then
evening after I'd been pushed to this limit, it was basically, I felt I'd pushed myself to a point where it was just, commit suicide or make life better. Because that day was just, it was not what I wanted to do with my life.
I don't know how many people listening. I don't know. It'd be a fascinating conversation to ask about other people's days that sound similar. Because I had a job when I was 18 washing pots at a hotel in Bavaria.
Wow.
And it was hell. So it's
pot washing is shocking.
Well, it's funny that I can actually relate reasonably literally to a pretty... I mean, again, I'm not trying to make a comparison. This is in terms of relating. I can actually physically not be too stretched to put myself literally in those shoes, which is quite funny. So I'm wondering what other people are doing who are listening, like how they're putting themselves in those shoes. Because maybe they can't. Maybe some people can't completely relate. So it was the next day, and then what did you do? Then did you carry on working there, or did you leave Australia, or what happened?
I had to finish my shift. So that was my fly-in day. That was my first day of 14 days. And I managed to keep going. I dug deep and decided that this was going to be rock bottom. And from that day, started making small changes, very, very small changes. That same stint that I was there, I was in the gym a few times there, and I started to have a look a little bit at what I was eating. I tried to go to bed a bit earlier, tried to smoke less. At the time I was smoking quite a lot to handle whatever I thought I was handling or didn't realize I was handling. And after that I never went back up north.
And then, I mean, I guess I don't want to ask for a short version really, because I'd love to hear the whole story. But I mean, what would then be sort of the train or the chain of events in terms of healing? You've already alluded to some where you started to cut back a bit here and become a bit more aware there. Is that what then happened? Like, what's the time frame after that? Was that then the 4.5 years?
Yeah. So the 4.5 years started that day. And like a lot of people, I started on the surface. I look at this work with two levels, and we're sort of sandwiched in between. The surface level is sustainable habit building. So that's addressing your lifestyle, right? Your fitness, your eating, nutrition. Do you need any extra supplements? Do you get enough sun? Do you hang out with enough people? It's the connection. It's all these amazing things that we now know today. I think a lot of people speak about this. We intuitively know what we need to do to support ourselves habit-wise. But what I have found to be the biggest game changer in terms of healing has been building those sustainable habits over time. Again, you can't do them all at once. You have to do step by step. It's not an all or nothing mentality. And I was one of those people who had the all or nothing mentality. And so I would go at it, change everything, and then fail. And then go at it again, change everything, and fail. And so until I'd done that quite a few times before I realized I had to just do one at a time. Because you're impatient before you begin, and then you realize it would have taken you, you'd have already built 3 habits if you'd done it one by one from the beginning. But underneath is trauma healing. And so around trauma healing, I mean, this can be anything for anyone. Trauma, I think, is understood as something very extreme. And it is. There is extreme trauma. There's also mini traumas. And what happens with mini traumas, and this was the case with me and how I ended up falling into depression in the first place, it was a series of mini traumas over the years and years and years of my life that hit a tipping point. So if you think of, trauma filling a bucket, and then when the bucket inside of you hits its full point, the next trauma, the next argument, the next extreme emotion that you feel, the next time someone bullies you, that tips it over, and the whole thing, and you fall in to whatever the trauma manifests in you. In me, it manifested as depression. But for a lot of people, it manifests mainly as anxiety or panic attacks or chronic fatigue or autoimmune. There's all sorts of mental and physical health issues that trauma, the build-up of trauma, because we store it in the body, it builds up and it builds up, hits a tipping point, and then it manifests. And so for me, it was mini traumas. There was not some extreme trauma that happened. And not one is not easier or more difficult than the other either. And one is not more traumatic or less traumatic than the other. The comparison is a challenge, because it's easy to say, oh, well, my trauma is not as bad as his or her trauma, and so why am I feeling the way I'm feeling? It's really important to understand that no matter how you feel, you have the right to feel however you feel. And I guess coming to that and looking down the trauma healing side of things led me out in the end. So it was a combination.
How did you learn about the inside piece about mini and extreme trauma?
Honestly, that was something that I've articulated through what I've experienced and what I understand to be true when I've worked with other people as well. I think over time, I'm such a deep thinker that over time, when I think about these things, it's important for me to take these concepts that seem very outlandish and then put them in, either analogies or explanations, or articulate them in ways that we can all understand very simply. The more simple it is, the easier it is we can digest it and make use of it.
And how useful is it to understand all the traumas? And I think, I'm guessing you know exactly what I mean, but I'm just going to clarify just in case people listening aren't 100% clear. And where I'm going with this is, well, I'll have to put it in. I can't explain this brilliantly, so I'll explain it as best as I can. When I first trained as a coach in 2002, what appealed to me about coaching was this piece in the book about how coaching is getting people from where they are to where they want to go. And it's not about therapy. It's not about digging up the past, which is focusing on, the past and things that I can't remember the rest of it, but basically just that it's very limiting how useful it can be to just sort of figure all this stuff out. So that's what I'm asking is what's your, I guess, approach about understanding like all these mini traumas? In other words, how much time you should spend on that versus then, actually moving on, getting on with your life and moving forward. I mean, can you talk about your experience with that?
Definitely. The beauty of healing, and especially when you do look at healing your traumas, the beauty of healing is when you heal one thing, it has a ripple effect. So you absolutely do not have to go back and address every last little thing that's ever happened to you. It's not about going into your past and getting stuck there. The other thing that's very impactful for what I experience and for the clients I work with. We can do a lot of things with our minds. Our minds are amazing. Mm-hmm. And so I call it the low-hanging fruit. So the low-hanging fruit, the low-hanging traumas that are very easy as an adult for you to look back in your childhood. Bear in mind, most traumas come from our childhood. So that's why it's like an adult-child perspective. Mm-hmm. You as an adult can use your thinking brain. You can use your logical, rational brain. And you can look at how you understood certain things as a child, and you can reframe those as an adult. And a lot of these beliefs that you picked up as a child, if you can have the compassion and understanding for why you believed that and why you needed to believe that, that's fantastic. And as an adult, you can decide, right, that was useful then, it's no longer useful now, I need to let go of it. And sometimes it's as simple as reframing it as an adult and thinking, gosh, yeah, that makes no sense. That doesn't serve me. I'm going to drop it. But there's a lot of things that are not that simple. Mm-hmm. So what I like to start with when we do like a life trauma review, which is can be quite intense, but you have to try and do it with as much like objectivity as possible. You do it from a bird's eye view, very quickly, very simply. And we go back in and we try to catch the low-hanging fruit first and tick everything off that we can with our minds. We can reframe with our minds. That already has a ripple effect and makes everything else a lot easier. Because when you heal those, again, the ripple effect moves through. Then for the deeper things, this is where the mind is not as useful, because the mind is going to get sucked in and it's going to tell you stories and it's going to replay everything and it's going to bring up a lot of very raw emotions. Trauma is registered in the body. And so if you can bypass the brain, bypass the mind, and get into your body and release your trauma from your body, that's when true transformation happens. And so those are sort of the two levels. You can do it from your mind, and then you have to do it from your body. Because your body knows how to do it.
Oh, so how do you release it from your body then?
There are lots of tools. I have a guided body scan, which is a very great place to start. It's not so intense. There's breath work, there's meditation, there's movement. There's lots of different tools that you can do. You have to find what works for you. Mm-hmm. It's not a one size fits all. Sure, and sometimes one thing's good for you now, and then you move through it and you need something else, and vice versa. Maybe you've used something, you grow out of it, and then you need it again. So I think the whole base of it, actually, one of the things that I think has served me the best through this entire process has been my genuine curiosity. Mm-hmm. Curiosity for what I like, what works for me. Mm-hmm. And I like to try all these different things. It's a trial and error. I think a lot of people want to be told this is how you do this and this is what you're going to get in the end. But it really is, it's supposed to be an adventure, I think. You really have to go on a bit of an adventure and be curious about, your body, your mind, your spirit, how your life kind of is. It's
funny you say that. I almost feel like, and I should just speak about myself rather than assume other people, but that at the beginning of your work, if someone's working with you, they might need a mini course on how to be more curious, because obviously we have it as small children, but I think a lot of us lose that. And what you're saying, I've certainly read about it in other books, or the idea, I guess I could just speak for myself. I just know it doesn't come easily. Like it sound, I can understand the logic behind it, but to actually practice it, it's funny you talk about, I forget how you worded it, but you say seeing it as an adventure. My first thought was, well, again, I'm surrounded by people who, of course, think there's no time to do anything, like they're just all crazy busy, and who probably, I think there are quite a lot of people who just says, no, just give me the recipe and make it as short as you can so I can do it by tomorrow. And so I love hearing your, I guess the real world approach to what actually works. It's kind of like you said, the step by step. I think too, again, I'm unfortunately a rather impatient person, but I am definitely clear, much clearer now about the step-by-step piece, and that's, if you just stick around long enough and keep doing it. In fact, I interviewed someone recently about this, and I said, I can't remember what I asked him, because it wasn't a tacky question, but it was something about time frame, about like, how long do you typically need to do this kind of thing before you see results? And his response is, well, in our program, that we use the word until. You do it until you get where you need to go. And I think, again, many people don't want to hear that. They want to hear that it's a 21-day course, and by then...
I resonate with that so much. Yeah. I'm so impatient. And one of the mindset shifts I had to address and cultivate was around my understanding of time. And being so fascinated with habits and building habits and how you make sustainable habit change to support your lifestyle and support your goals and everything. We don't understand, I think, or I certainly didn't even consider this when I first started becoming so obsessed with habit building. Habits cannot be built without the quality of time, because you have to have time in order to build a habit. Because the definition of a habit is something you do over time. And so if you are impatient like I am, and I still am, I'm not going to pretend that I'm not, but I've softened around these timelines, because I understand that without time I can't progress, I can't build a habit, I don't have any momentum. And nothing gets achieved, because we can't do one single big thing in one day or one moment. It has to be a series of small things all pieced together over time that lead us to that big thing. So I think that was one of the mindset shifts that I found the most useful, is that the habits don't get built without time. And so you don't get results without time. And I guess it also put a slight sense of urgency in starting the habit, because the longer you wait to begin a habit, the longer you don't have it to build that momentum and to make that change.
I feel like I'm about to ask a silly question in a way, but I can't help myself. If you were to look back on that 4.5 year period, you've already talked about a lot, actually, that you addressed. I mean, really, and certainly from a big picture standpoint, you've addressed certainly the main areas. I mean, if you had, looking back, if you had to sort of pinpoint, can you pinpoint sort of 2 or 3 turning points? Maybe they were epiphanies, or maybe they were experiences, but I'm just curious, maybe just as a starting point, but to get traction in understanding at least your healing process. What would you identify as sort of 2 or 3? And maybe that was one of them, was the realization that habits have to be built over time, and that's the only way they're built. I don't know if that's one of them or not, but what would you say sort of, the 2 or 3 that jump out immediately as you look back on that time period?
Immediately, there are 2. One being a habit, and one being actually directed towards healing. So the biggest habit for me was exercise. That was honestly, I'd always been really sporty and stayed quite active growing up. But I realized the lack of consistency didn't support me. So consistently training, and exercise is nature's antidepressant. So as long as you find an exercise that suits you, and this goes back to the not one size fits all. And again, back to the curiosity piece. If you understand what makes you feel good in terms of exercise, it should make you feel good afterwards. Even if it can be a little challenging during, it should make you feel good.
To extrapolate, so at some point after you'd been exercising consistently, you realized that you were feeling good, and you connected the dots to say, yeah, and I think it's a lot because of this positive activity. Is that a fair comment?
Yes. Yeah. And the more I exercised, the more energy I had to make changes with other things.
Yeah. And
do you start with my food?
What's that?
I didn't start with my food, because that would have been the other thing that I would have said was important. But exercise for me was much easier to build first, and then afterwards I used the motivation. I was like, now I'm training regularly. Why wouldn't I start looking after my health with my food? So it became a knock-on effect. And then I think the other one for me was a deeper one, and that was always asking myself, whenever I was feeling whatever I was feeling, was trying to understand where in my body I felt it. That was a big one for me. And usually when I ask this question, most people can pinpoint where it is, and not above. It's not your head. So for example, if I was to ask somebody dealing with depression specifically, where in your body do you feel it? It can be a bit of a strange question in the beginning. And it mustn't be in your head, because it's not. That's not where depression and anxiety and all of these mental health issues, that's not where it resides. It resides in the body. So below your neck, anyone can have a think, whatever they're dealing with, anxiety, panic attacks, depression, where in your body does it sit if it was to take up a physical space in your body? And where you can start getting curious around that is every body part has a emotional association. So for example, when I was led to this at the beginning of my journey out of depression, I asked myself this question, and my answer was in my throat and in my upper part of my lungs. And so when I looked up, you might have heard of Louise Hay.
I have heard. Oh, yes.
Yeah. So Louise Hay has a book called The Life. You Can Heal Your Life. Okay. And so I looked up what throat and lungs, like upper chest, was associated with. And of course, it was associated with not saying what you want to say. And having been bullied for so many years in my life, I didn't have the confidence to say what I wanted to say. And so I was always holding back. I was always stopping myself. I don't know if it's because I thought I didn't deserve to say what I wanted to say, or if I was trying to be polite. But ultimately, for me, I knew that it got stuck in here. And so I started taking steps towards speaking my truth and sharing my voice. And it slowly but surely shifted everything within me.
And just out of curiosity then, this book presumably then goes through all the body parts in terms of if you're feeling it wherever, and then she has suggestions about how to remedy that?
Well, she has an affirmation that links to all of it. So she has the body part, what it's associated with emotionally, and then an affirmation. But I use it, I use the affirmations, but the key for me was understanding what it represented.
I see.
Because everyone I've ever shared this with, if they've said something like their foot or their lower back or their right arm or left arm or hand or stomach, and I've said to them the emotional understanding behind it, every single person has gone, oh, that makes sense. Because you know your body and your life best. You're the one who's lived everything you've lived. And so just opening up the conversation and entering into the conversation around, okay, there's a message here. There's a message here that I'm missing, because we only manifest dis-ease if we're missing. Our life isn't balanced. Something's missing.
But then what about the physical part? Or the release? I mean, the release, is it all cognitive, or aren't the things you eat or drink or, that can contribute or alleviate some of those areas, or not? Is it purely a physical, mental thing?
I think it really depends. I mean, obviously we can all support ourselves by eating well. But it goes back to the curiosity piece. If you know that you're feeling this disease or this issue in an area that is because you're holding what you want to say back, then you need to put yourself in situations where you say what you want to say or write it out
Wait, and is this all body parts or is this just the throat part?
That bit's about not speaking your truth. For example, lower back relates to financial issues. So if someone was to say, that's where I feel it, well, then it would be good to have a look at their finances. Have a look at where they sit. Are they where they want to sit? Again, the curiosity. How do I look at money? What's my money blueprint? What did I learn from my parents or the people that raised me? How do I think about money? What if I see something that I can't afford? How do I respond to that?
And is that, so when you coach people, and I'm going to be way overly simplistic on this, initially it's about identifying, I suppose, the traumas from the past, and then it's connecting to the body. Is that right? Sort of to release or to address some of those things. And I'll get to a question in a second. And then, and then it's about kind of helping people develop better habits around presumably exercise and then also what they're eating, correct? That part, yeah, okay. And then where does the inner piece come in? Like, I couldn't help but notice in your bio, it said that you'd done some NLP, which is, for those not familiar with neuro-linguistic programming. I mean, how do you incorporate the subconscious work or the brain part into your work? And if so, how does that come into it?
Definitely. So when I speak about building sustainable habits, there's behavioral habits, which is what we've focused on more in this conversation.
Okay, the surface part, right?
The thought pattern habits. I link those both into habits. So you've got your behavioral habits and your thought patterns, which are also habits, what you think about. And so there are lots of tools that you can do, you can use, you can practice, and you can consider as to how you think about things and how you change the way you think about things. So that's sort of where more the NLP comes in. I have lots of tools that I can share with people on how to see situations differently.
What have you done? Can you give an example either for yourself or someone you coached as far as what you're talking about?
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
So I have had to, let's see, the biggest one for me, I remember the time that this worked the most or was the most beneficial for me. When you're in such a heated situation, and this for me, the example was between me and my mum. So we had been in an incredibly heated situation. And for the life of me, I could not see this situation from her perspective. I just couldn't. And I suppose I pride myself on being able to always see, no matter if I agree or not, I pride myself on being able to see it from everyone's perspective as best I can. Obviously, I will never be able to sit in their shoes, but I can at least see it. And in this situation, there was so much raw emotion that had been stimulated by this situation in particular. And it just was blinding me from being able to could not see it. And so I use one of these techniques from NLP, which is called the dissociation technique, where you imagine yourself moving back behind your body. So you're there in a physical space. And bear in mind, I did this after the fact because it was too heated. You don't do this in the moment.
Okay.
This is me reliving it. And you imagine yourself stepping back out of your body, and you step one step, and you step another step, and you keep stepping back and back and back behind yourself in your mind's eye until the emotion doesn't have the control over you anymore. And that could be all the way to the moon. If you have to move all the way back to the moon in order to not feel such an intense emotion, because when you feel so intensely, it stops your logical and rational mind. So I wanted to be able to pull myself all the way out of my emotional state so that I could get into my rational state. So that was the first step. And so I could understand, right, what were the emotions that were being brought up, and I could put them into words, because when you name it, you can address it. It's not a label that imprisons you. It's a label that frees you. We can speak about that afterwards. I'm quite passionate about that. So using labels for your benefit. So it was this emotion or this emotion or this emotion. Okay, the second piece to this was when I was then able to kind of walk back. You must remember to walk back into your body. You can't leave your body on the moon. That's an energetic, that would cause a lot of issues energetically. So you've walked all the way back, you've understood which emotions you were dealing with, and now you bring yourself back into your body. Step one. Step two is then to remove yourself from your body again, to envisage the heated situation that you had just been a part of. Mm-hmm. This one was with my mother. And I was to put myself in her body, looking at me. Again, you've got to do this in your mind's eye, and you've got to be able to visualize this. So I came out of my body, crossed the living room, crossed the kitchen counter, and I was looking at myself through my mother's eyes, in my imagination. And that's when you have to sit into the feeling of that person. And I immediately could see what she was seeing, and I could immediately understand why she had said what she'd said and why she felt, how she felt. And then you do the same. You have to pull yourself back out and back into your body. And then now you can sit with these two pieces, what you really feel and what they really feel. And you can then decide how you want to move forward with that.
I've never heard of anything like that before. That's and that was pretty transformative for you, was it?
Yes, because when you just have no concept of where they could be coming from, it becomes very difficult to know how to communicate, to know how to change the dynamic or the situation, and also prevent the same thing from happening again, because it's such a waste of energy to get so worked up in situations. It really is a waste of your energy, especially if it's negative. Yeah. And it's trauma causing. That's what it is. It's not necessary.
Earlier on, you talked about stories. There are stories we have. Again, I guess what I want to ask is how do you help people with that? Is it a similar process, or is it the different strategies? Can you talk about that? And I probably should elaborate for the people listening, just to be clear. So, there's this notion that we all have stories about why we are the way we are, and that we unwittingly repeat them over and over again. And usually they're unhelpful and unempowering stories that limit us. So I'm just curious again, what you've learned about that topic, and I don't know, anything useful you can share for people listening on either how to become more aware of them, but then also how to get rid of them.
Absolutely. Yeah. The lady I go to for this is Brene Brown.
Okay.
Come across her work.
Oh yeah.
She does a lot of work around vulnerability,
right,
courage, a little bit on shame. And one of the pieces she uses, and it's a line that I've used over and over and over again, and you've said it within your question, it's the story I'm telling myself about this situation is. And the moment you write out the story I'm telling myself about this situation is, it becomes something that's up for negotiation. It doesn't necessarily mean it's true, and it doesn't necessarily mean it's not true. And so that for me is the greatest entry in. And again, the curiosity piece. So if I'm telling myself a story that what I say doesn't matter, and that I'm not important, and that what I do means nothing. So it's up for debate now. Okay, so that's the story that's been written. Now, what am I going to do about it?
That's really useful. So my only concerns going through this, what we've talked about, and it's just, again, we haven't talked long enough, I know, is around the subconscious mind, because some of the points you've made, they make, again, a couple of the points So like that one, for example, let's stay with this point actually. So rationally, I understand what Brene Brown's talking about. But how do you influence the subconscious mind to actually take different action?
And this is what we were speaking about before. So there's a lot of things that you can use your logical mind, your conscious mind, right? Mm-hmm. We have control over our conscious mind. So you want to use your conscious mind where you can to change beliefs, change stories, reframe, and do all of that. In terms of the subconscious mind, those are a lot deeper. Mm-hmm. And I truly believe that by getting into the body first, you influence from the body up into the subconscious mind. And perhaps I'll tap into one of the things that were the most important for me in terms of the subconscious shift that I felt. And it was learning to trust myself. Mm-hmm. And I think a lot of us do not trust ourselves. Fundamentally, we don't believe that we can handle our life. We don't believe we can handle challenges that come up. We don't believe we can get what we want. We don't believe that we can be the instigator of change for good. We just don't trust that we can take all our amazing ideas and actually create them. And this was a big deal for me. I think this was one of the things that deeply stung when I realized that I fundamentally did not trust myself to do what I wanted to do. And the shift then came where I started using very, very simple things in my life to prove to myself that I could be trusted. And that is as simple as looking at a chair, saying in my mind, I'm going to sit on that chair, and then going to sit on that chair. And then going to the bathroom to brush my teeth and saying to myself, I'm going to brush my teeth now, and then brush my teeth. And it was this small, step by step by step, these little tiny pieces of daily things that I would say, okay, now I'm going to go to the gym. Mm-hmm. If that was a struggle for me at the time, I was going to prove to myself that I could be trusted to do all these things like, okay, now I'm going to eat lunch. Now I'm going to brush my teeth. Now I'm going to sit on that chair. Now I'm going to open my emails. Now I'm going to send a message to my friend. And I would use this. And then when I told myself, right now I'm going to go to the gym, I would go. And then I would highlight that to my mind and say, look, you said you were going to do this. You went and did it. This was previously a challenge for you, and you've done it. You can be trusted. You really can do what you say you want to do. Mm-hmm. And again, I think this is, I really think that we as adults, we don't understand that we really are children inside, and our brains work the same way. When you can play a game, when you can do step by step by step, and you can tick tiny little things off your list or use tiny little things to show yourself that you're trustworthy, that's where the big difference comes. That's the daily tangible steps. They feel very silly, but they work because they build a foundation of whatever you're trying to build on that. Because then the next time you say, right, today I'm not going to have sugar, maybe that's a really difficult thing for somebody, and then you don't because you trust yourself.
So it's building up gradually to ever more challenging things. Is that sort of where you're going with this?
Yeah.
And then
start with really simple things.
And then at some point, though, surely with, well, possibly arguably almost everybody, they're going to hit sort of a worthiness ceiling of like, well, I don't really deserve to have that amazing relationship or that kind of incredible health. I'm used to average. So where does, are you suggesting that the micro steps can help you push through those things more easily?
I think building a foundation of trust, that you trust yourself to do what you say you're going to do, is definitely useful there. When it comes to actually doing the big things and succeeding, that becomes more of a conversation around your upper limit. I think Gay Hendricks' book is incredible and was totally life-changing for me. And that's when you feel into the goodness and the greatness and the amazingness of the parts of your life, because otherwise we balance it out. If you hit a great success in your career, you go home and have an argument with your partner.
Yeah.
To feel grounded again, it brings the balance down.
Yeah.
It's something I've absolutely had to work through as well. The more I do this work, the more amazing feedback I get from it. And the more challenging it is for me to not do something to feel worse, because I'm so not comfortable feeling so fantastic.
Yeah.
And so you have to train yourself to do that. It really is and the way you do it, Gay Hendricks explains it, you have to sit in it and you have to allow yourself to feel it fully. And then I use a lot of grounding techniques. You can ground yourself into the ground. You can do it seated in a chair, and you just imagine being rooted into the ground, into your chair, and feel the support of the floor and the chair on your seat and your back. Or you can do it even better. You can do it outside, sitting on the grass, and you can ground yourself into the actual ground. It's so peaceful and so calming, and it's just a way of bringing your energy into a space that you can feel good in.
So you're saying to sustain the good feelings, a great strategy is to literally
ground yourself
by sitting on the earth.
Yeah.
Is that what you're saying?
Yeah. I mean, ideally on the earth, but you can do it just sitting at your desk. It's a visualization thing. So you want to ground all of your energy, feel everything coursing through your body, all the greatness that whatever that thing has brought into your life. And this is where the mind is. You can really, really play with it. Our minds don't know the difference between a visualization and reality.
Yeah. And I'm embarrassed to ask this question, but how is that grounding helpful? Like, what exactly is it? Where does that go next? Like, I can see that it would feel good for the time that you're sitting there, but then how is that helpful beyond that?
It depends. I mean, there's lots of different ways you can do it. The whole point being that when you receive, an either incredible news or a great promotion or something's going really well, and you want to sit in that amazingness, you also want to be conscious of the fact you are potentially going to go home and have that argument with your partner, or you're going to get irritated by somebody in the traffic on the way home, or like you're going to find some way of bringing that great feeling down to the level that you're actually used to being at, which is not necessarily feeling that great. And so it's instead of waiting until your body does it naturally, do it consciously. And you do it consciously by grounding. So it's simply bringing your energies, all of the greatness, feel it all through your body, and then channel it into the earth, and vice versa. Take the energy up from the earth as well. And just imagine it as a two-way street. You can play with your imagination. I mean, the other thing that I've enjoyed doing is I do a visualization. If I really am very excited about something, if my energy is very airy-fairy, I stand on the earth and I imagine roots coming out from the bottom of my feet. So I imagine tree roots kind of growing from the bottom of my feet as deep as I can imagine them. And then I imagine chopping them off underneath my feet. I can then move, but the roots stay. So as and when I get overly excited, I just imagine those roots because they're there already.
I got another question I don't really want to ask, because I actually truly, I don't like asking gender questions, but I can't stop myself. I mean, do you find that women are more open to the types of things, the specific types of things you're just talking about, or not at all? Or is it just, unfortunately, the little mini bubble I've lived in where I'm picturing, I think of all the financial advisors I've coached, and I mean, hundreds over the last...
Imagine tree roots growing from your feet.
I'm just thinking, I'm just laughing because I'm just thinking, I mean, they'd struggle to well, to hire me again anyway. But no, I'm just curious what your experience of that is. I mean, because I think a lot of this is, well, for sure, some of this is about, just as you said, being more curious and open, right?
Yeah.
And I'm just wondering if you find that women are more open to the things that you've just talked about than men or not.
Well, I certainly end up speaking to more women about these sorts of things, maybe because I am a woman, I'm not sure. The saddest thing for me is that when men are spiritually connected, they are so powerful in their lives. It's not just a women's thing. Spirituality is not just a woman's thing. I feel like men miss out so much if they don't extend their goals and their purpose, their drive into their spirituality. Because the men I have met who are spiritually connected are just unstoppable in their careers, because they are pulling on aspects that most people don't consider useful in those things. I mean, the male financial advisor who can connect to his spirituality would absolutely skyrocket in his career, because he's drawing on things that like no one else is bothering to look at.
And what do you mean by spiritually connected? Or what's your definition of that?
Spiritually connected, listening to your inner voice and taking the time to really understand, I guess, the smallness of you, but also the hugeness of you, because we are the universe inside of us, each and every one of us, but we're also just one person here in like human form. So it's this outrageous contrast that I think we need to learn to sit with better. It's the laws of nature. It's the yin yang. It's you can't have the dark without the light, you big and small. It's our entire universe, our lives are made up of these laws of nature. You can't have one without the other. And so what we tend to do with our overload and the struggle, because you have to be bigger, you have to open yourself up bigger to be able to hold space for how small you are and how massive you are, for example. Right? You have to be bigger in order to understand that feeling so horrendous, like terrible, also makes way for you to feel so incredible. So it's holding the polar opposites all the time. You really have to expand your capacity to just be with what is going on. And I think being spiritually connected is this walk, this journey towards being able to hold polar opposites of everything and not defaulting into what's easy or convenient, which is what we like to do. That's where stereotypes come in, right? It's very difficult for us to hold that one person or one type of people could be and both. They're not either or. And so we stereotype because it's easier for us. And I think coming out of that and reconnecting to everything that's here for us is definitely gives you that edge.
And what are some things that you recommend people doing to kind of, let's say they don't consider themselves particularly spiritually connected? What are some good things to do to kind of get better at that, or definitely be more open, embrace it more?
100%. I mean, the easiest place to start is to notice everything. So from the moment you wake up, if you've slept with your windows open, for example, notice what you can hear, notice what you see, notice what you smell, notice what it feels like under the covers, and then move through your day noticing everything. Notice the flowers, notice the butterflies, notice the squirrels, notice the pavement, notice the person next to you or exactly what they're wearing, or notice what you've just thought about when you smelt eggs for breakfast. Or it's so simple. Yet again, it's all the way back to the micro. if you want to make a big difference in the macro, you have to attend to the micro. And it's that, I must admit, then you build this sense of awe. You build this sense of, wow, our world really is quite magic.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, again, I'm embarrassed to share this but only because of these podcast interviews have I been, because this isn't completely true, but it feels like I've been exposed to the concept of having a gratitude practice because I've interviewed several people that talk about it. And I'm quite good. I've got quite good at adopting good ideas from people I'm interviewing because all of them are getting great results in some area of their life. But I will say that. So I feel like I'm still probably a 2 out of 10, quite frankly, even though I've been doing it for a while now. But I'm using that as an example in terms of building this and practicing it. But there are moments where I can start to sort of see, okay, now I understand why this person insists on doing this every day, because when you do get that feeling, it's a surprisingly different feeling than what I've had for most of my mornings in most of my life.
Exactly.
So I do hear, I totally hear where you're coming from. No, maybe that's not true. I want to become more of this type of person myself. And so, I need suggestions are welcome, but obviously also for people listening.
Gratitude is wonderful, and the reason why it works so well, and again, it comes off of noticing things, right?
Mm-hmm. Yes.
You can't be grateful and a negative emotion, or what we call a negative emotion. Mm-hmm. You can't be grateful and sad at the same time, for example. Mm-hmm. So what you're doing by focusing on the feeling of gratitude, and again, it's less of a mind thing, more of a feeling thing. Mm-hmm. You're better off to think of 3 things that you're grateful for, but feel what it feels like rather than just write, the list of 10.
Yeah. Right.
So once you feel, when you're in that vibration, that's the important part, because you're raising your vibration. It means you don't feel the other lower vibrations. Yeah. But again, it's understanding that the only reason you can feel gratitude is because you also have the capacity to feel such deep sadness. Our human capacity is so massive, and it's a shame that we're all so much, I know we're all striving for all to be in positive emotions and happiness and gratitude and all of this, and it's fantastic. Mm-hmm. But I find that the beauty of humanity, the beauty of being able to have this conscious experience, is that we get to feel all of it. Mm-hmm. And when you have a deep knowing that everything's impermanent, you have a bigger capacity to move through all the great things and the shocking things.
Yeah.
You really have such a big capacity for this.
Sam, I could talk to you for hours. And I know that we should wrap up. This is endlessly fascinating. Absolutely. It's this is why I like to do video as well, because, and maybe it isn't true, but I can feel like that you've shared this, tiny little, if I'm talking to a deep swimming pool, it's just a tiny little piece at the bottom that I've had a chance to talk to, because I can feel that there's so much, you've been through so much hell and have learned so much vast amounts of useful things that can make a difference for other people on your journey. That, there's, you can't fake any of that. So it's exciting because by my standards, you're quite young too. So you've got, there's so much more in terms of capacity to just keep growing and learning and helping all those things. So it's amazing. So a couple questions to wrap up. From that day in Australia, when you had that hellacious argument and hit rock bottom, who would you say you've become since that day?
Wow. I must admit, one of the first practices that ended up coming past my way after that day was this question, who do you want to become? Mm-hmm. And I remember writing out this list of, qualities. I just thought, wow, if I had become this woman, then everything would be fantastic. And from that list, I actually became that woman in November 2018.
Oh,
and the beauty of that was is that I felt like I had become this woman that after 5 years of writing that, I then got to write a new one. Because of course you never stop wanting to become better. So my new version is somebody I imagine I will be in the next 5 years. But it was a incredibly emotional experience to realize that over 5 years I'd become the woman I always wanted to be.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And I like the fact that you repeated 5 years, not 21 days.
Yes.
But you didn't answer my question. So, but who have you become since that time? Like you said, you achieved the things on the list.
Yeah.
So you can, I don't know if you want to just share what was on that list, or if you want to share.
I can share some of the things on that list.
Or who you're becoming. I mean, it doesn't, I'm just curious. Either way, how have you changed?
So one of the big things for me was I became somebody who practiced what they preached. I became somebody of integrity. Integrity has always been incredibly important for me. And I'm very sensitive to people who say all the right things, but don't do the things to back it up. That also comes from my childhood. And so one of the biggest things for me was to do what I say I was going to do, to practice what I preach, to lead by example, and to walk my talk. And I knew that because I ended up on stage at a bodybuilding competition last year in November. And that day I knew I'd walked my talk. And I knew that the fitness had been consistent, my nutrition had been addressed, my self-worth had been addressed. I felt really confident. And yeah, I'd definitely become the woman who deserved to be on that stage.
Yeah, that's fantastic. And then how can listeners keep in touch with you and learn more about what you're doing?
And the best place for me, I'm always on Instagram. So I'm Sam_M_Howard.
Okay.
And then I will have all of links and things. You can message me on there directly.
That's the best way to get in touch. Okay, brilliant. Very good. Okay, so Sam, this has been a real honor and privilege to hear. I know just a segment of some of your wisdom, but it's been an amazing journey. And I don't know how many people acknowledge you. I mean, what you've done is amazing, and what you've learned is remarkable. And it is pretty rare by my life experience anyway. So and also to be at this point now where you're so keen to help other people as well take their own steps, and I guess what most of us are engaged with, or at least myself and some of the people we know, I mean, just to shortening people's learning curve as well, so they can get there faster and not have to make all the same mistakes. But I love the fact that you have much more, I would say realistic, but I like your perspective on it, that there isn't just this, sign up for a short course and within a matter of days you'll be transform your life and so on and so forth, even though I do know those things are possible. But anyway, but speaking of which, I do know you mentioned you have put together a course, correct? I mean, can you just say a couple of words about that?
Absolutely. So through all of the coaching that I've done in the last couple of years, I've put together a self-paced program that launches later on in this month. And it goes through what I've found as the 9 sections, step by step by step. 9 modules, and it delivers tools that you can try out yourself. And the idea being that, yes, it's delivered over 9 modules and you could do them in 9 weeks, but it's more about building a toolbox. Yeah. So that as and when you deal with challenges, you can go into your toolbox and go to that section and try those tools. Yeah. So it's not about start and finish and everything's hunky-dory in 9 weeks. Because no matter what you heal, whatever you heal in the 9 weeks or the 12 weeks that you do it in, everything's going to come up. And more is going to come up in your life beyond the course. Right. And so it's more of building a toolbox where you're comfortable, that you can trust yourself because you have the toolbox and you're ready to go whatever challenges come your way. And I think that confidence is missing for a lot of people. They don't believe that they can make it through it. And so maybe they give up well before they really ought to. And what's the course called? In other words, what's the focus of the course? Healing depression. I've specifically focused on healing depression. And then I will have a few more around high performance coming later in the year.
Yeah, awesome. Fantastic. Okay, well, thank you, Sam. This has been amazing. And I encourage everyone to, just start keeping in touch with Sam and, visiting her on Instagram. But also, I'd urge you, I think I would imagine every single person listening has people in their family that are, have some depression issues. I can't imagine you have any family exists that doesn't. So just letting them know about that as a resource, I think would be a very wise move. And there will be links to this on the show notes page, matt-anderson.com, matt-anderson.com. Otherwise, I'll leave you all with a reminder about my mastermind courses, which are launching in September. And I absolutely love them. I think they're a fantastic format for people to make long-term change. And my favorite question, which is, what would you do if you knew you couldn't fail? I'm Matt Anderson. Thanks again, Sam. And this was The Road Not Taken.